Hello everyone on live stream. I'll just focus in on the board for the live stream. It's a bit out of shape at the moment. Okay, just going in on the board. Okay, board should be getting pretty cool now. Is the board good enough now on live stream? Board's okay? I hope it is. So I thought this week, topical week again, so I want to mix going over old masters and recent tournaments. Actually, we can put a little bit more of the board on here, I think, on the left. That should be a tiny bit better. The board should be still okay. So yeah, Yue Wang, he won the Hastings Congress, and we're lucky enough tonight to have David Hayden, who nearly got an IM norm from the Hastings tournament. He's a FIDE master, and he's got a bullet rating actually on chess-based server of 2553 and a blitz of 2607. So he's not bad, and maybe he can chip in on other games, but we've got one of his games at the end of this. So first I thought we'd go over Yue Wang's wins. So as black, this is one of his wins as black against Gudmundur. I don't even know why I try pronouncing this. Kjartansson, I have no idea. But he was 2-3-2-6. So what did Yue Wang do after d4? Okay, he played knight f6, and it looks as though he's going to play the king's engine, but no. Critical moment here. King's engine Grunfeld chooses Grunfeld defense, which is very popular this year. Almost it overtook the Slavs' popularity in some tournaments. So d5. Okay, now white chose a very modest move continuation here and played, okay, it looks a little bit of a timid move to play e3, but I guess it avoids theory, the mainstream like theory. Okay, it hems in the bishop, and is it a little bit passive? Maybe you could argue. Okay, but how to kind of exploit it? Bishop g7 was simply played. And now queen b3, which is a little bit annoying. The pressure on d5 and b7, which has been exerted. Okay, now e6, which seems as though that might be a little bit of a controversial move, because surely you might ask, queen a3 would stop black castling soon. In fact, queen a3 is a tempting move which was played to stop black castling. And does black really want to exchange off queens against someone much lower rated, 300 points lower rated? No, he doesn't actually play queen e7. He just plays knight c6. And now after knight f3, he blocks the queen's diagonal with knight e7, which facilitates, of course, black castling now. But does black actually stand okay here? Well, it seems white wasn't that keen on getting on with things to just play bishop move and then castle. Instead, the white king was left in the centre with this next move, just playing b4 actually, and now black simply castled. And now the point's revealed, I guess. Queen b3 with again a little bit of pressure on the queen side. You could argue that these guys are mobile and have options. Okay, now Yue Wang plays b6. So this seems to be preparing just the bishop, ordinary bishop fianchetto to fianchetto, strengthen d5 control, and white releases the central tension against d5 by playing c5. So I guess white's avoiding a kind of tactical type of position, being content with this kind of solid looking pawn chain, hemmed in bishop like the French defence, but this queenside pressure looks as though it might be quite promising, one could argue anyway. Rook b8 was played, which might introduce bc as a threat potentially against the queen. especially if followed up energetically now, which it is. Well, the queen actually shifts away from that b file anyway, with queen c2, but white's still not moving the bishop and getting castled. And now knight e4 starts to put some real pressure on white. So what are the immediate threats here? And what is going on here with this pawn sack anyway, you might ask? Why can't white just win a pawn? Maybe we should check that out. Say takes. It looks as though maybe just b takes here, and we've got a very strong diagonal. And okay, what are the options for black here now? I think knight d5 or bishop b7. It looks fairly dangerous, but I can't actually find... I don't know, does anyone have a concrete idea here of playing the position? What do you think here, guys? So do you think bishop b7, or is there something more concrete here? I wonder about this pawn sack. Say bishop b7. Okay, say the queen moves somewhere. I'll put it on g4. Is there some concrete disaster here? Or does there need to be? Maybe just black's got loads of pressure. I guess we could take and play for e5 just to sort of really open up, put the pressure on this diagonal, and this might be quite unpleasant. Okay, but if anyone's got more concrete method here for what would happen after the pawn sack, then if you spot anything now, then David, are you there? Do you have any ideas here about this pawn sacrifice? Blitz Pro? Anything? What, just bishop b7? Or e5 immediately? But bishop b7 first? So takes here, bishop b7. You think in this position, e5? That looks good enough anyway. Okay. Alright, so he didn't take that. He left that knight on e4. And he just plays bishop e2. And unfortunately now, black is going with tempo now. Again, attacking something else before white's castled with knight c6. So b4 now attacked. Yeah. Okay, you agree with that. Bishop b7, bishop f3, e5. Okay. So now white actually takes on e4. But black doesn't have to just recapture here. He can take now on b4, attacking the queen. So the queen attacks the knight, but we're getting a long transaction now after takes. Queen takes b4. We have e takes f3. Bishop takes. And now e5 anyway, rupturing white's centre. e5 is usually a thematic break. When white plays for c5, often breaking up the centre with e5 is often a good idea to really kind of hammer this pawn chain structure. Okay. White doesn't want to castle here and lose d4. So he takes, but now he can't castle. He's just forfeited his castling rights, unfortunately. And this is, I guess, a little bit embarrassing not to have been able to castle. It's a bit sad, really, I would say. He's over 2300 and he hasn't managed to castle. But I suppose, and it looks pretty dire that, you know, this option is giving black loads of counterplay. So black seems to have loads of pressure now for the he plays rook b6, which can prepare to double like this, as well as protecting the bishop, of course, against the queen. So rook d1, queen e8 though, so putting pressure on e5 is preferred now. That's protected. But now queen a4 hitting a2. Bishop d5 protecting a2 and threatening maybe e6. The bishop's evicted with c6. Okay. Now it goes back to f3. I wonder about bishop b3. Is that an option? Or is the idea of bishop f3 for g4? Because now queen g4. If we look at queen g4, unless there's anything better, or maybe queen b5 threatens e2 and also threatens c4, winning this bishop on b2. Would you say queen b5 is the stronger move here? Queen b5 looks pretty strong. Unless rook d2 holds things up. Again c4 though. Bishop has to go back to d1. Interesting. No, he wouldn't want to play c4. So I don't know. In this position, also queen g4 is worth checking out. Again, it threatens mate. And it threatens g2. So maybe this is stronger. This could be stronger. Couldn't it? Queen g4. You know, this will be a disaster if rook queen takes g2, bishop's on f1. That would be a disaster. So queen g4. Jordan says that looks good on live stream. Splits Pro, do you agree queen g4 might be the stronger move here? Yeah? Possibly? Okay, anyway. So so bishop f3 might have had that intention actually, just to secure g4 control. But now the pawn can be nabbed. It's a miserable position for white to have. Rook a1, queen goes back to e6. Okay. Now threatening probably rook takes and bishop takes would skewer queen and rook. White sacrifices the exchange here. He plays rook takes a6. Rook takes a6. And castles. At least he can castle. Great. He's managed to castle, but is the exchange down. Rook b8. Okay. The exchange up. It's probably a matter of technique in a way. What major threats does white have? So he wants to get the queens off. Okay, he's got the queens off. He's got a pass c pawn. It looks like technique is kicking in. So putting pressure now on everything. And it's going downhill, but there might be this vague threat of e6. But it looks as though black's pretty dominant here, the exchange up. Okay, he doesn't mind losing that pawn. He's getting this diagonal for the bishop anyway. This looks initially quite interesting, but just king f7. And now again, black just looks to be the exchange up basically, and he's winning f4 now it seems. So this looks all over well and truly, just the exchange up. Plays on a few more moves, and here white resigns. So let's do a quick overview and summary. It seemed a solid, like, dynamic Grunfeld, where okay, white's c5 didn't work out that well because of knight e4. It seems as though this was quite nasty, this move, dynamic. All of a sudden it springs black's pieces into life with knight e4. So basically white was on the back foot now, it seems, not being able to castle. And this was a really good move, hitting a2 and now, you know, forcing the bishop back, so loss of time. Okay, the exchange up and sort of technique after that, really. White, the exchange down, it's a bit not really that fair on white. Okay, so a pawn was given back, not much play for white. Okay, but he was to face higher opposition. Okay, let's go on to the next game. Whoops. Okay, against Pavel Simacek, who I believe David Hayden did play. This is the guy you played, isn't it, David? In one round. And he played the Dutch. So this is an international master who likes playing the Dutch defence. Very exciting, really, to play the Dutch defence. I'm thinking of totally giving up the Dutch defence in serious FIDE chess. Because I got crushed in 20 moves recently by an IM. I don't really trust the Dutch defence anymore against IMs especially. So, but anyway, so knight f3. So he plays f5. So knight f3 is not committal. It's kind of Reti opening. So f5. Okay, exciting. So d4, knight f6, and we're going to go into the Leningrad, pardon me, sorry, the Dutch stone wall with e6, as though this sort of stone wall of pawns is going to be constructed. So bishop g2, d5. Of course, you know, the Achilles heel, the dark squares are all a bit weak. That's the price you pay. In the stone wall. So bishop d6, of course, playing to exchange off the dark square defender of these squares is key strategy. And white hasn't committed yet even to c4, hasn't been played yet. And in fact, for some reason, the IM is keen on active counterplay on the queen side with c5, and this happened in the game we're going to see later against David Hayden Blitz Pro on the chess-based server. So he's playing dynamically the stone wall, but queenside play queen a5. Okay, it does attack the knight, forcing a seemingly passive move, queen c1. Now c takes d4, as though black is going to use the c file. Knight takes d4. Queen c5, hitting the knight, which is now protected with a kind of fianchettoed queen. Okay, now castles. The knight goes back to f3, which, of course, that fianchettoed queen is nice for e5 as a focal point here. And these pawns are kind of restrained. Knight c6. e3, fixing even more d4. b5, as though this knight's not that good. Now knight d4, another point of e3 was to be able to play this knight d4 move. So b5 is under fire from the two knights. So it's actually moved to b4, knight b1. And this looks a bit strange that the knight's going back to b1, but dark squares are potentially still vulnerable. Bishop d7, as though, you know, a rook move or something is going to be useful for like c-file pressure. Rook c1, which facilitates c3 or c4, which will put pressure on d5. Rook ac8, and now c4 is played. And when I engine checked this earlier, actually just taking on c3 was kind of recommended, not leaving the pawn on c4 but just taking. But black actually, for some reason, he didn't fancy that. He just played knight a5 instead. So it looks visually that c4 is an issue and the c file is an issue. There is, after all, battery on the c file. But now knight d2, just connecting rooks and supporting c4 seems a good counter. Queen goes to d6 here, because c takes d was threatened anyway. a3 now, which looks like a strong undermining move, to make use of the a file. Has black overstretched it? e5, and now the knight retreats again. And what I don't like about the black position is it looks as though the pawns are being really committed again. Now, after these exchanges, e4, look at these dark squares, they're still weak, and these pawns are committed to light squares and kind of fixed on light squares. White's got an iron grip on f4, so it looks as though white has a very pleasant position indeed. And he's also undermining, of course, on the a file to get his rooks active. Past c pawn is dangerous too, so I would say white looks a lot better here. Of course, that's biased by the game result and the rating difference of the players. It's easy to say, oh yeah, white's better here. But actually, does black have much counterplay objectively? David, would you say black looks to be sort of strategically losing here, isn't he? Because of this big knight on d4. It doesn't matter the bishop's blocked in, because, I don't know, it's even got this diagonal. It's got this diagonal potentially. But it doesn't matter. This knight's more important. This c pawn. So rook takes a3, pressure on a7, protecting a7, queen a2, protecting and putting more pressure again on a7. Black's position he lost, David, our FM reckons. So rook a8, yeah, it looks as though this is horrible. Now rook a5, putting pressure now on f5. Protecting that, creating more dark square weaknesses everywhere. Okay, bishop f1. So now the bishop can actually be used, on this diagonal maybe. The king moves out of the way. c5. Another perk of rook a5 to support the c pawn. Queen e7. And now this moves c6. Okay, for the moment the c pawn's pinned. So king h6 was played here. Maybe trying to get out of the way for knight e6s to be check or something. Or this diagonal was a bit dangerous. But unfortunately, queen a1, actually black resigned here. Okay, and you might wonder why. I think one reason, and I have engine checked this earlier, is on bishop c8, that doesn't do anything about knight b5. Okay. Now you might think, well, what about bishop e8? And actually there's a key move here, which I didn't instinctively pick up on. And if I give you guys 10 seconds, I wonder if you can find what a key move to nab a pawn here would be. Sorry, 20 seconds starting from now. Okay, so all put your thinking caps on. 20 seconds starting from now. What would you play here as white? Okay, we've got one good suggestion, we've got one not so good suggestion. Knight b5, no, because rook takes c6. Rook takes c6 if knight b5. There's a crusher. Rook takes f5. Blimey. Unfortunately, the king hasn't escaped fork. Ouch. Ouch. And this is a horrible pawn to win. It smashes up black's pawn structure. I don't know what black would be doing here. Let's imagine putting pressure on c6. The rook could then swing back and now threaten knight b5. So it's clear, it's a horrible position, really. And there's also threats like bishop a6 as well. So black resigned, actually. He, in this position, he had enough here. He resigned. Does that look convincing? What about bishop e6? Yes, I was going to ask that. What about bishop e6, Jordan asks. Now again, it doesn't do anything about knight b5, does it? Okay, it protects f5 from the glare of the rook and knight. But what about, I think just knight b5 would force the rook back. And maybe we have rook takes a7 here, because the knight's also supporting a7. Does this look convincing enough, or is there a stronger continuation? It looks fairly dire for black here, doesn't it? Would you agree? Anyone disagree? Okay. So, unfortunately, you know, I'm surprised by this IM, how easy it seemed for people to beat him in the Dutch defence. I don't know if I'm really quite biased by that, and that's quite severe. He must win against lower rated players or something with the Dutch to still play it like this. I don't know. But let's have a look at, in overview and summary. So it just seems oh sorry, rook e5 instead of knight b5. Oh, pardon me. Okay, we'll go back there. Sorry, David writes on bishop e6. Oh, of course, rook e5 is even stronger. Yeah, nasty pin. Whoa, nasty pin. Yes. That looks helpless for black against e6. Good point. Good point. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. That looks terrible. So that's a real crusher. Rook e5. Well spotted, David. So let's do an overview and summary. So black, I don't know. There's a case for not playing the Dutch defence, I think, nowadays. But because white doesn't even have to play c4. You know, he's not even playing c4. So it's not even his mainline pets. It's just simply getting the perk of getting rid of that dark square bishop. And just having a really solid, comfortable position on the dark squares. Fianchettoing the queen. And only later playing c4 with huge bonuses available. That black's pawn structure is in bits on the queen side as well. So he's got this horrible position now, with a7 being a target soon, as well as other things. Past c pawn, a7 on a semi-open file, fixed pawns on light squares. It all culminates in a strategic disaster. This position, strategically lost, you could say, after rook a5, emphasizing this and this, and the c pawn now is coming up with deadly effect in this position. So black kind of resigned here. So yeah, king h6, queen moved back. So we had, you know, bishop e6. Yeah, rook e5 looks crushing. Bishop c8, knight b5 looks crushing. Bishop e8, rook takes f5 looks crushing. So the lesson there is, well, expect to lose some games if you play the Dutch stone wall. Okay, and you lose your dark square bishop. It's the classic recipe for disaster in the Dutch stonewall. We've seen in many games previously anyway on our broadcasts. So the Dutch stonewall is a bit dodgy, okay, as no thing. So let's go on to another game. So here he was white. Okay, so now this is against one of the up and coming like 19 to 20-year-old Indian players in the tournament, who I think both achieved norms. And so Shyam had a fantastic performance in this tournament. He was black here against Yue Wang. Shyam actually crushed one of the GMs quite badly in a video which is on YouTube.com Kingscrusher. Which can someone find the link for that video? It was a Sicilian disaster with how an innocuous move turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing video. It's a recent video on YouTube.com Kingscrusher anyway. But Shyam, he had that brilliant game. It was Tau-like, but he's playing black here against Yue Wang, and he does play solidly the opening. He plays e6, Nimzo engine, solid, reliable, sort of, you could say dry, boring. But after d5, bishop g5, okay, he immediately asked the question about the bishop on g5 with h6, and white plays bishop takes f6, voluntarily giving up immediately the bishop pair, which in these queen's gambit positions declined. This is an interesting idea. Oh, someone's got the YouTube link here. Thanks. I'll just put that YouTube link to Shyam's win for those interested. Whoops. That wasn't very clever. Sorry, back to that. Whoops. Shouldn't have opened up that window. So we're back. Sort of. Note to self, don't do that again.
News flash alert. I've just seen a horrific game played on board 2 at the Hastings today.
Okay, sorry about that. Whoops. I shouldn't open YouTube videos here. That's not very good. So we'll go back to this game. Let's just go back. It started off, Queen's Gambit declined with an immediate bishop takes f6. Queen takes f6. Now Yue Wang, he plays e3. So what has he got from this opening? Well, without that bishop, the c file pressure, e5 better, c5, these were strategic targets accelerated, I think, with this bishop takes f6. Strategically, David, what do you have to say about this bishop f6? You've used it in one of your key wins, didn't you? Bishop g5 takes f6. You don't mind giving up the dark squared bishop, do you, in this pawn structure? I guess it all depends on the position, though. Yeah. But black sort of plays the Nimzo Indian type move, bishop b4 check, and plays energetically now c5. Okay, so now c takes, e takes, liberating that bishop, but this d5 is a bit weak. Bishop e2. Now both sides castle. So the question here is this d5 versus the bishop pair. Bishop e6. Okay. Now in this position, this seems to be a very specific move that was played here, not a sort of general move, but a very specific one. Not based on the nuances of the position. Knight b5. So I think he's threatening to immediately win a pawn with a3 and d takes, and then come back and blockade the d pawn. And that's exactly what happens. So knight b5, he plays a3, and he plays d takes, and he's got a nice blockade square set up on d4 now for both the knights against this isolated queen's pawn. And he did offer b2 in the process, of course. So equal on pawns after that. Six pawns each, but beautiful blockade on d4. So this bishop doesn't look that hot at the moment, the one on e6. Knight d8. Protecting b7. How else to protect b7? If rook b8, this doesn't look that pleasant. Maybe queen a4 is good here. Just hitting these guys. That doesn't look pleasant. So knight d8 looks as though black is having a difficult position already in this position. Queen a4. This queen over here doesn't seem to be doing anything compared to this queen. It seems the queen side is more important than, you know, what is this queen doing here? It's just staring against these two. It doesn't seem to be that significant. The king is quite safe. Bishop c7. Okay. So rook fc1, as though this c pawn is dangerous again in this game. Queen e7. And now g3, which provides also the possibility of knight h4 to f5, as well as the king hole. Bishop d7. And now white doesn't mind even exchanging off the light square bishops, because, you know, this d5 pawn still remains weak. Lovely blockade. Now, I guess we can see a pattern in Yue Wang's play that, look at his dark square grip, guys. Look at these. You saw the previous game in the Dutch. Look at his dark square grip. It's pretty cool the way he grips on strategically. It's like an iron grip on the position here. But black's, of course, more solid than the previous game without f5 and stuff. Yeah, iron grip and just slowly increasing advantages like Botvinnik or Smyslov. That kind of school of chess. So bishop g4, avoiding light square bishop exchange. Queen b3, okay, really targeting d5 for the first time directly. Bishop goes back. And now knight h4. Blimey, and now horrible threats. What can black do about this? This is really unpleasant. Clearly he doesn't want to play a move. This is unthinkable to weaken the king side, isn't it? I don't know about an immediate refutation. It just looks like too much weaknesses. So actually he let the knight come to f5. He just played rook c8. White actually wasn't interested in knight f5 here anyway. Instead, actually, I mean, maybe knight f5 is interesting to check out. Why not knight f5? Maybe just takes and queen e5. Okay, but he didn't do that. No, instead white actually just takes on e6. Now, clearly, if takes, then knight g6 would fork these guys. So he takes actually with the knight, which might imply, you know, maybe there's knight g5 to here. Queen takes d5 is on. So it was a pawn sack as well. So why not queen takes e6? Is there a problem with queen e6? I think rook d1 looks fairly unpleasant. What does black do about d5 here? Doesn't look as though there's many options in this position for black anyway. It seems d5 is lost by force. So it shows actually that one of the powers of knight h4 was this idea of knight e6 and knight g6 if f takes. So that was pretty horrible, this knight e6, horrible stuff, winning a pawn. Okay, and now bishop d3, and he looks to have a free reign of the light squares as well. But he's giving up his c pawn. The point of knight is also to attack. So that's lost. Equal on pawns again. But white dominating on the light squares. after queen e4, threatening for the first time accrued mate. f5 stopping that. So we have a Dutch defense transposition with f5. So queen b4, inviting the exchange of queens, which was accepted. Pardon me, and you play knight d7 instead of knight c6? I'm not sure, sorry. Hold on a sec. Let's just run through. If you could reserve, I don't know. If you give move numbers, easier to investigate. Okay, but here, rook takes c1, and we have the exchange of queens. So we have opposite colour bishops, equal on pawns, 4, 5, 5, but f5 major target. So white's going a pawn up here. Again, pawn up. But so g4. But this light square bishop's lovely on e4 now. h5 protecting g4. Vix the knight. Knight g5, which hits bishop and h3, so the bishop retreats back. Black takes now and plays rook h8. It's okay, knight f3 is possible. So we have a rook and bishop scenario now, with black being a bit passive after all that. So bishop d6, offering this pawn for that pawn. b5, declining that offer. B pawn's protected. So white has here actually a 3-to-1 pawn majority, and he starts preparing that now. So g5, which is not a long-term suppression of the pawn majority, just temporary. Check. And then the rook takes over the h-file menacingly, coming into the black position here. It looks as though this is the only hope for black. Check. Check. But actually this big bishop, you know, it does cover a2. So after this next move, funny enough, black resigned here. Black resigned here. He had enough. He is going to lose this pawn, and it still looks grim. You know, he could be losing this pawn later, and the bishop would just come back for covering a2 potentially. So black resigned here, even though opposite coloured bishops. He's going to win, you know, that other pawn. It starts to get really embarrassing. So that was a solid strategic grip game with increasing advantages gradually. Let's do an overview and summary of that game. So an early exchange on f6, and it seems d5 was a target later, especially the way black tried to play it. He's loosening d5 a bit here, and this blockade was set up on d4. So white was already standing very nicely in this position, in this open sort of position at move 15. There's an iron grip. This is like Botvinnik or something, Smyslov. Positional stuff, kind of riskless chess, queenside pressure, king very safe from threats. The dynamism black is missing, and now this knight h4 seems quite crushing because it transforms the game, well, with exchanges, into a horrible position where he's forcibly winning a pawn anyway pretty soon back, the f5 pawn. 15 queen e7 is better. Should we go back? Okay, okay. That's worth looking out. Okay, maybe carry on the comments on YouTube. I'll upload this broadcast to YouTube, so if you've got any technical questions, put the comments on YouTube.com Kingscrusher for this video. So rook d8. It looks as though black was grovelling here. He used up a lot of threats, but they didn't do anything. They just got this lost, seemingly lost ending. King g2 also means, of course, you know, this is coming in. So now once the king's there, even more powerful for rook h1. So winning another pawn, and that was it. Okay. Okay, let's go back to 15 queen e7. Sorry, okay, I should really go back here. We're saying that, was this really going to change the picture of things, queen e7? Really? Do you really think so? What about just queen a4 here? Isn't white just better anyway? It looks horrible because of all this pressure. What does black play here? I suppose tactically he's got this, you know, rook takes, bishop takes. You just take on c6. Isn't white just still better after queen a4? It looks miserable here, doesn't it? Positionally. Would anyone argue it doesn't look positionally lost here or losing? It looks like a terrible bishop to have. Weak pawn, queenside pressure. You want to play knight takes d4? Could recharge the blockade. I don't know, just protecting this. It looks horrible. Here's c6 maybe. It looks pretty horrible still, this position, but there's probably better ways of playing it for white as well. Okay, let's go on to another game. Now this was a real surprise for me, this game. What I found surprising when viewing this game. So David Howe was Britain's great hope for this tournament, to beat off the foreign players, and he just seemed to get on the back foot from the opening in this game. So he plays white, and he has played this a lot of times before, the c3 Sicilian, and it seems black plays an effortless remedy to equalise, starting from d5, which used to be like the old, you know, the standard way of handling the c3 Sicilian. So e takes, queen takes d5, fine. d4, black simply plays knight c6 now. Okay, so Wang is white against David Howe. So there's not too much FIDE rating point difference between the two. About 60 points. Okay. Knight f3. And now all Yue Wang does is bishop f5. Bishop f5. Doesn't bother pinning the knight or anything. Simple move, bishop f5. Actually, it's never occurred to me really that you can just play as simply as this with black. Don't know about you guys, but bishop f5. I mean, he's simply preparing, you know, e6, bishop's outside the pawn chain. Then he can just castle, isolate queen's pawn. Why not? Okay. So knight a3, which looks as though it carries dangerous threats, you know. C takes. Bishop c4. And I don't know, it's strange. I find this very strange that white maybe believes too much here in this idea or something. But he's inviting this check, yeah? But all black does is offer up an exchange sack now, leading to a position which black seems to be better out of the opening. Oh, sorry, bishop takes b1 was a threat after bishop f5. Okay, we're at move 8. So also it's been noted that bishop takes b1 is a threat. Maybe taking and then later e6 and bishop b4 check for d4 to be weak. Sorry, okay, but let's go back, sorry, to the game. Check. So king f1 was played. And now e6. So is this threat really that dangerous? It's going to be tested now, but black simply offers an exchange check. He simply plays d3, which threatens queen c4, invites knight c7, but black already is technically better. If we look at knight c7 check here, king takes, king d7 takes, threatening d2, the knight's kind of stranded. Black, I think, is better here. You know, you just play knight f6, you just play bishop d6, you just take this knight. So anyway, David just ends up with a miserable position now after d3. He just plays knight fd4. It's not a major success, this opening. Takes on d4, c takes. Now rook c8 covers c7 and attacks the bishop. Okay. Now here I think bishop b3 is refuted with d2 actually, because of queen d3. So say queen d3, just winning the bishop. So f3 was played, which doesn't look right to play f3. Queen c6. Okay, takes on d3, takes. So black has ended up a pawn. No, not a pawn up, sorry. It's equal on pawns. Okay, that's the good news. So the good news first. 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. King's over here for some reason. C-file is good. Isolated queen's pawn. Oh dear. Why is white on the back foot here with this position? It seems very unfortunate disposition as white after move 15. I don't know about what you guys think, but it looks as though this is horrible for white. Okay. Knight f6, clear blockade again. Iron grip on the position. And instead of allowing this blockade, actually David sacrifices a pawn now. Maybe to keep some dynamism in the position going. He prefers to just sack a pawn and get the queens off. Okay. So he's a pawn down in this ending. And, you know, the rook on the 7th looks good. Okay. Exchanges off another pair. Maybe he's hoping to draw or something, this position. But unfortunately, he gets ground down now. Black just systematically grinds him down. Keeps the rook and bishop configuration. And starts locking down the dark squares. They start to be locked down now. That's one plan. So they're starting to be locked down. Okay. So what's the second plan? Okay, so we've got a lockdown. It's kind of a grueling win. Now d4 tactically for bishop e5 if takes. So the bishop moves. Rook c7. So offering this for rook c2, which would hit these guys. So rook e4, rook c1. Again, offering d4 for a bit of time. Maybe rook g1 is best, because then, you know, this pawn would be a runner if g2 was lost. Rook e1. Okay, and we have pressure build up. b5, starting to lock down these pawns. Doesn't mind the rook and pawn ending. So he's locked down both sides now, restrained. And he doesn't. The king and pawn ending will be trivially won. If rook takes d4 here, trivial win. Just the king gliding down on the dark squares. End of game. So this is miserable. So what happens here? He plays for f4, but actually there was a moment where white seems to be on the verge of an equal position. Actually, in this moment, and I had checked this game earlier, and believe it or not, it looked as though this was a key blunder here, king e5, which kind of loses immediately. If white had something else here, I think rook here for lots of checks would have been good for g5, but king e5 hastened to the end. When I was checking with an engine anyway, it just simplifies into a lost king and pawn ending rather brutally after rook c3. There's no time for white, so here David resigned. So it looked like another solid win with black this time, against a pet system of David Howell. Just completely just kind of the venom taken out, and white not even castling, just offering an exchange sacrifice with d3. This seems to be very bad news for white. So there's threats now, and it's just horrible for white to have this position. So he plays d5, I guess, to avoid a blockade, which would make his bishop look silly, and black would just pile on the pressure on the c-file probably. So so the end game was a bit of a grind, bit of a grinding win here, locking down kingside pawns, locking down queenside pawns now, and transforming it into an easily won ending. Well, with a bit of help from white, I think king e5 was more chance, but now a king and pawn ending, unfortunately, is completely lost for white. So these are positional wins, I would say. Many of these are great positional wins without too much risk that we've seen so far. So let's have a look at another game. Whoops. Wrong. Okay, against Nicholas Pert, who's one of the higher rated opponents, 2563. Now this was a bit of a strange game. There was a pawn sacrifice in this, which didn't seem to offer too much compensation for Nicholas Pert. Another Dutch defence as well. Stonewall kind of structure. Or was it? No, it was actually Leningrad Dutch classical. Sorry, not Leningrad Dutch. Classical, where black usually castles queen e8 to h5 is an often used plan. So white's solid here. Knight e4. Just bishop d2 here. So knight d7, he's going to reinforce the e4 knight, Nicholas Pert. And he comes up with this crude kind of classical maneuver. You know, is the queen going to be really aggressive or not? Takes on e4 and just plays bishop c1. So what is this bishop c1 business? Maybe he's like saying, come and get me or something. So bishop d7. Again, positional maneuvers. Knight e1. And now b5. So knight e1 did actually threaten the knight. And if the knight had moved back, maybe, you know, bishop takes b7, just nabbing a pawn. And if d5, I think we have c takes, winning the c7 pawn. So black, he plays like this gambit now, b5. So it's now a gambit to try and, you know, weaken maybe white's king. Is white really going to win this knight? Well, he does. He takes the pawn here, and he simply takes the pawn offered. So does black have enough compensation here? That's the question. David, does black have enough compensation? Do you know, Blitz Pro? What do you reckon? How is the compensation here? This bishop on the diagonal, does it look juicy? Maybe for blitz chess it's really good, dangerous. But here it seems white kind of consolidated very carefully the pressure. So constructing this position, tucking the queen behind. So the bishop's being blunted. g4, making sure that these pawns are fixed. Now he's going to swap off with d5 later, these bishops. Queen e1. Maybe that's handy, protecting the bishop for d5 later. a4. But also he's on a5 actually. So a4 might have been a threat for bishop takes a5. That battery there. a4. But he's now weakened b4. So that secures a nice knight for white, knight b4. So positionally, the knight is also supporting d5 to get rid of the bishops now. He's going to support the knight with a3. So black's lost ground on the queen side. So a3 reinforcing that knight. It seems again, yeah, this guy's like a supercharged David Hayden. This is exactly how Blitzpro plays, positionally. Iron grip on the position. Smyslov Botvinnik would be proud of these games. Where is the risk? Where's the gambit compensation? Not much. Queen d2. Okay, so black hasn't got too much counterplay here. He does take on g4, rook a5. Offers the exchange of queens now, which is accepted. And now he starts working on the C file, of course. C7 is a target on the semi-open C file. D5, E5, King G2, not minding the seemingly dynamic E4. He just plays rook E3. He's got F3 covered now with everything. So King G3, avoiding any cheapos. Check. And now wins another pawn. 2 pawns up. And backward C pawn, sort of King's Indian nightmare to have a backward C pawn like this. And after King F8, it looks as though the A pawn's dropping off as well after Rook C4. So A4 is going to drop off after Knight D3. Here, black resigned. Black resigns here. So that seemed to be a gambit without much compensation. Another positional performance. Just solid positional play. Some delicate little moves with bishop d2 and then going back soon. So the idea was just to put the rook on d1 and then move the bishop back if needed. So bishop goes back. So that's all it did, bishop d2. It wasn't to do anything from d2. It was just to go back. So knight e1, tactical liability. Tactical liability. Tactical liability for d5. So gambit time, b5. So the gambit was simply accepted, and it was up to black to prove compensation, and there didn't seem to be compensation. It seems actually a5 is a target in this position for queen e1. So the pawns are getting fixed. Queen e1 is on that poor a5 pawn. Now b4 is conquered. Looks quite simple consolidation effort here. This bishop doesn't look as though it needed more support. These pieces are not particularly great in this position, it seems. So another pawn sacrifice coming up. 2 pawns down. Made to look easy. He must have calculated a lot of variations and stuff, and he made it look like an easy kind of, you know, making sure there was no gambit compensation. Okay. So let's look at another game. Against Vovk. Andrei Vovk. Okay. d4. And we have a King's Engine. Dynamic hypermodern opening. Popular in the 80s, 70s, say 80s. So now what did he choose against the King's Engine? After e5, he doesn't play kind of castles. He plays bishop e3. And I think one of the most popular moves is knight g4. But actually, black decided to take on d4. A little bit of a surprise. Trying to break open the centre with a quick d5 in this game. So he plays for a quick d5 here, as though black's got some counterplay. All white does is now take with the e pawn and castles. And now if d takes c4, I think bishop takes c4 is interesting, because the queen b3 and then f7 is a bit vulnerable. Actually, but black decided to play knight c6, and this allows c5, which leaves black with an isolated queen's pawn. So it's a positional treatment of the King's Engine, this variation. Knight h5, queen d2, covering that f4 square. Bishop e5. It looks as though, you know, it has black got, well, actually that's covered by that. Here. Not really sure. We can rule that diagonal out. Okay. G3 covers things. Anyway. So knight g7. Look at this. An iron grip blockade on an isolated queen's pawn again. A lot of his game seems to be winning with the isolated queen's pawn being a major issue. For the opponent. So even if it came from a King's Engine, we still end up with an isolated queen's pawn. So this, we could call this session isolated queen's pawn night. All these games where they just have no counterplay, and now the queenside pressure starts piling up. Bishop b5, knight b3, pressure immediately on d5. Knight e7. He doesn't mind the exchange of the light square bishops, and he wins that isolated queen's pawn. Doesn't mind losing a flank pawn for it. So what's the damage here after bishop f6? Equal on pawns, but now some positional manoeuvres. Knight d2 makes it easier to play the position once the knight is on e4. Knight e4. He completely controls the d file. He's got access to d7 for hitting b7. Knight e8. So he controls the d file. Again, this running c-pawn, yeah, you're right. This is getting to be familiar patterns in these wins. Like a recipe for winning against the isolated queen's pawn. King f8, rook infiltration, unpleasant. Rook c8. Now locking down the pawns again, g4. He's going to lock down these pawns, reducing mobility. Actually here, a tactical move was played now. c6. Actually, he's threatening bishop c5, skewing the rook. So b6, stopping maybe bishop c5. Knight g5, now threatening knight takes h7 check. Rook c7. What else can black do here? He can't move the king without losing the rook. He can't just play this because check anyway would win the rook. So this was a weakness of the last move. Look at this, what black had done, and it's a disaster. He had played bishop e5 and g5 became available. See that, knight g5? So c6 first. Rook c7 here. So he's nabbed a pawn. Now he takes on e7 and plays rook d7. No time for anything here. Bishop d6. So he's a pawn up. Knight g5. The knight maybe is going to come back for a visit on e4 to put pressure on d6. Bishop b4. And now this bishop comes into the game with check. That's unpleasant. Because if the king moves, then maybe knight e4, and then we've got knight f6 coming in, as well as rook d8. So f6 was played. Now check. And now the pawn is able to move, supported by the knight and rook for queening. So just winning a piece. Just winning a piece. So he's a piece up. Black resigned. So that was cruel. So much for King's Engine dynamic play. Not in this variation. It was horrible. It led to another isolated queen's pawn situation. So it seems if you want to lose horribly a positional game, just give yourself an isolated queen's pawn against Wang Yue. So another isolated queen's pawn scenario, which black's counterplay was kept under control. Doesn't mind exchanging off the light square bishops. Doesn't mind trading d pawn for b pawn. He's got other trump cards now to play with. Possession of the d file. Knight coming to e4. So this looks horrible for black here, grovelly, and it just went downhill. Weakness of the last move coming up with bishop e5. Just white's forcibly winning a pawn now after knight g5. So that was a brutal kind of win, this game, where black didn't have much counterplay. He just was sort of ground down without too much risk. Well, winning a piece now. Okay. So our special guest game now, David Hayden, nearly got an IM norm. Let's finish off with a look at David Hayden's win against an IM. So our very own Blitz Pro and Mighty King on 2 servers. So David Hayden was white against the IM, who outrated him by quite a long way, more than nearly 150 points. Actually, okay, do the maths. About 150 points. So knight f3 from David Hayden, Blitz Pro. So David, just say anything you want, and I'll relay it during this game. Okay. So Dutch defense from Pavel. So you played solidly with g3. So it was a Dutch stonewall, d4, and he plays bishop d6. And now you didn't commit your c-pawn. Like Wang, you don't commit your c-pawn with c4. Is that a bit of a waste of time? You just play b3 here. Just get on with maybe, exchanging off the dark square bishops. Queen e7 prevents bishop a3. So now you play c4, and you're content, it seems, with a grip on e5 here instead. Alright, you saw the game with Wang Yue and you thought you could outplay him with a similar idea. You've still got queen c1 as an idea for bishop a3 if you want, but he tries to rule that out, discourage that with a5, I guess, because he's going to create a nice block on b4 now. So bishop a3, there'll be knight b4 maybe. So you're content with dark square pressure. Well, you have to be with e5 pressure. After castles, you play knight e5. So you can maybe put... you can maybe play this as well, and then this, and then that, if you want. If you get both knights like there, then you can play f3 to evict a knight from e4. So bishop d7. But actually you decided to just snap off his light square bishop. That looks like a controversial decision. But if you don't, then maybe this is quite good anyway. This bishop here is putting a bit of pressure on your position. So sometimes that bishop isn't that bad. Paul Georgiou demonstrated that. He won a nice game in the Hastings Congress recently with his bishop coming to h5, and it was okay. So you took on d7. So it looks like a controversial idea. But okay, you reinforce again e5. You're just content with a modest little grip on e5 here. And now he starts going a bit crazy on the queen side. He plays b5. And you play queen d2, offering pawn sacrifice in the process, because you can regain that pawn and then plough in maybe to his other pawn. So takes. He doesn't want to take your c-pawn, he just keeps his pawn structure intact. Bit of pressure on the queen side. And like Wang, you're pressurising a5. Of all the pedantic things in the position to pick on, yeah, you're picking on the poor a5 pawn with this battery. Is that what modern chess has come to? That we pick on a5 pawns? Really? Really? Dear oh dear. Is that why he was so annoyed that he played bishop b4? Giving up his dark square bishop, letting you dominate the dark squares later. Oh dear oh dear. I was wondering what this bishop b4 was about. So the root of all evils, just attacking a5. Why can't he just play... Does a4 lose outright? Can he just not play a4? Would that save the game here? If he just plays a4? Is there anything wrong with that? No? Did you not expect a4? I mean, what are you doing with your pieces here? Seriously, what is this? What's White's plan here? C5. Bishop moves back. Queen C2. You mean you want to pick on A4 now? Okay. Yeah. Okay, and the plan? Say knight B4. Okay. What would you play here? Would you just take on B4 here? Surely black's okay in this position. No? I suppose rook here. Maybe A4 is vulnerable. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, you know, if you win that, then you've got this winning past A pawn, I guess. Or just, yeah, okay. I mean, maybe that's okay anyway. Okay, so you say rook FB1 first, okay? All right, okay. All right. So anyway, he plays bishop B4, which seemed when I was looking at this game to be weird, because usually in the Dutch Stonewall, these are the weaknesses. So he's exchanging off his dark square defender. So you take on D5. Then you take on B4 and play rook FC1, and you've got a comfortable grip on key squares and C-file, and it looks as though you're doing great here now. Queen D6, and you play E3, which means bishop F1s are useful, as well as stopping F4s. Bishop F1s, knight C7. And now knight E1, which means that knight D3 and then knight C5 to E5 or even F4 become available. And this is crazy now. Crazy. His rook, he's about to park his rook on A4 in this game apparently. So knight B6 means the rook, you know, knight D3 is going to put his rook on A4 soon. So you stop the rook, you're cutting across there. And actually, you're threatening things now, aren't you? Like A3 already. So he plays knight C4. You take. It doesn't matter about your light squares. There's nothing to attack that. Queen C2. What does Queen C2 do, David? This is subtle positional stuff. You just want to play rook B1. Queen C2. You've also got knight F3 if you want to E5 now. Yeah. So Queen D7. And now you kick the rook. It has to go to that horrible place A4 of all places. Sick. This is really sick. Alright, so Queen C2 just had the threat of A3, right. What was wrong with A3 here out of interest? A3 there? Was that possible? A3 immediately? Oh, I see here. Sorry. He's hitting this one. Sorry. Yep. Got it. Okay, that's a subtle difference. Okay. Pardon me. Great move. Queen C2. So it just takes control of A4, right? For A3 to be a threat. Okay. Queen D7. So A3, forcing the rook to a terrible place. And now you've got the killer maneuver. Knight F3 to E5. So his C pawn's now in question, and you've forked D7 and C4. So Queen E8, and he's grovelling now. Knight takes C4, and you're threatening Well, you're just a pawn up. Rook c8, he pins you. Okay, fine. Queen b3. So you're dominating the position now, and you know these weaknesses are everywhere. You're threatening knight d6, it seems, among other things. Rook b8. So queen now goes to d3. h5, more weaknesses. Just in case you didn't have as many as you wanted, there's some more weaknesses as well after h5. So now you can dominate the b file, leaving him with this rook kind of stranded on a4, which you're about to engulf this rook. So knight b2, just kind of leaving the rook stranded in the final position with rook a1. So that was a very interesting, modest game, as though you had the tiniest of advantages and they became magnified with the opponent's seemingly active operations on the queen side, leaving him just losing a whole rook in the final position. So we can have a look in overview and summary. Well played. So well played against someone who's 2-4-4-8. That's amazing, really. So black, tried to play actively, and you just cheekily took his bad bishop. This was an interestingly strong decision. Maybe knight takes d7, counterintuitive to play knight takes d7. What do you guys think? Would you play knight takes d7 against the Dutch stone wall? So this gets just a tiny modest advantage, and it seems that this bishop c3 was enough to cause a ripple effect of black giving up the dark square bishop and white standing comfortably, it seems, better now. Yeah, while you're here, shall we have a look at your other... Okay, we'll just carry on for a bit here. So the rook got stranded somehow, and that was just a neat final position. A neat final position with the rook stranded. I haven't got the PGN of your other game. Could someone... Do we want to look at one more game of David Hayden of Blitz Pro while he's here? Or should we just maybe look at it next week or something? What do you reckon? Should we call it a day? It's been 1.5 hours, this session, nearly. So maybe we should call it a day here. David, or do you want to have a look at it now? Would you rather look at it? Do you want to look at your game now, or should we leave it for next week? But I haven't got the PGN. Unfortunately, I can't paste PGN in, and there's someone... Fantastic endgame. Yeah. There's a technical issue. I just can't get the PGN unless someone messages me the PGN. Is that possible on live stream? Can someone go to chessgames.com, go into Hastings and get the PGN? Okay, if you want. So we'll have a 2-minute break, shall we? Should I stop this live stream to upload this to YouTube, or do you reckon you'll get it in a couple of minutes? It's on chessgames.com, if nowhere else. If you go into Hastings, click on David Hayden. So your game against who? Okay, so has anyone got anything from the broadcast this evening so far about isolated queen's pawns, by the way? Was there anything instructive in Wang's games? He's going to be the new Chinese #1, the guy that won Hastings. is there anything instructive? It's quite instructive positioning, isn't it, these games? Send you the chairman request. Okay, I'm going to make you the chairman. Suggest as chairman. Okay. Blitzpro is the new chairman. Cool. I can rest a bit and just... Okay. So... You're chairman. Are you chairman now? I've suggested you as chairman. Oh, you've got it. Okay. Okay. So I'm back as chairman. Okay, the PGN's in there. So David was black. Okay. So knight f3. So it seems a lot of people are becoming very dull now to play knight f3. I did use knight f3 with great success myself in one club match season because it kind of is tricky for black to play against knight f3. So d5 after c4, c6, solid stuff. So Slav kind of fortress, Dutch stonewall without f5. So g3. An immediate c5 from David. White takes on d5. Queen takes d5. So after bishop g2, now David takes on d4. Castles. And you play d3 now. This looks kind of interesting. So you haven't castled. And you're playing d3. Bad move as it turned out. Oh, c5. Okay, e4, queen d8. e5. So knight d5. And he's got access to a few squares here, hasn't he? If he regains his pawn, maybe bishop g5 is dangerous. You've got some weak dark squares here. Bishop e7. So he takes on d3. Okay, you seem solid again. Bishop g5. And you don't mind giving up your dark square bishop. You play bishop takes g5. He doesn't bother throwing in a check. Because maybe e5 is weak after that. So knight e takes g5. Oh, the middle game endgame was good. So should we go to the endgame? Because I'm kind of wondering. I'm clueless about this game. Never seen it before. It's difficult to make interesting comments. So you're pressurizing e5, but you're under great pressure here down the C and D files. But you play tactically knight takes e5 anyway on his queen. Okay. Takes. Rook takes c8. Takes. So we've got a kind of simplified position now where you're a pawn up. You have actually nabbed a pawn. Pawn up. And so you kick away that knight. We get a more simplified position. Sorry, rook versus bishop and knight happened just then. Rook versus bishop and knight. After all that, let's just go back. So this combination gets you a position where you're rook and pawn versus bishop and knight. So rook takes queen. Rook takes c8. Okay, and he can't coordinate his pieces, I guess. If you can win this pawn here, you've got these pawns kind of ready to roll. So b6. It's difficult to coordinate the bishop and knight, isn't it? So you start going for his pawns. So you win one pawn. And now you can, I guess you can bring your king up over here. Alright, and now this is weak, potentially. So he takes... F takes... So you've got these pawns are now also dangerous. King G2. Then you play A6, so you forcibly get a passed pawn. B pawn. Okay, you've got one B pawn. Check. Rook A3. So you play King F6 as though now E5, so liberating with E5, E4 maybe on the cards. But you don't want to allow Knight D5 check, so you play Rook A5 first for E5. So now you play E5, King G5. So the Knight and Bishop are not much of a team here. Check, B5. This Bishop's bad, I think, for this pawn, isn't it? Knight C1. Encroaching with your king to win G3. Check. Okay, horrible, because the rook's really good for cutting the king off, so G3 is dropping. So Knight C5. King takes G3. And he resigned here. So could, if he had taken on F5, what do you play here? Anyway, is it? It's an easy win, I guess. Is it? David? Oh yeah, hang on. Let's check. Yeah, that is an easy win. Yeah. Oh dear, oh dear. He had enough here. Yeah. Okay. So Knight D3. I guess you just play check. And E4 probably. Yeah. So Knight D3 check and then E4, and then these pawns are horrible. Yeah. Well, good one. Okay. Yeah. That was good. So I don't know. Should we look at an overview and summary of that game? So against Alan Grant. So you were black and played kind of adventurously in the opening, and this combination to get a theoretically, materially, you were kind of losing from a material count perspective, but it was easier for you to play this endgame. The coordination wasn't there, it seems, between the bishop and knight. So the rook's quick to sort of get a pawn. So now it's not so bad. You've got two pawns now and a rook for the bishop and knight. So you get a passed B pawn, and then you kind of get to the G3 pawn pretty soon. The G3 pawn drops off pretty soon. With that tactic, very important. So bishop takes rook F2. Good one. Well played. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for coming up this week to watch the broadcast. I think that's enough for this week. Thanks very much. I'll be uploading this to YouTube.com Kingscrusher anyway. If you want to carry on chatting on the video or any other questions, put them on the YouTube video. Okay. Thanks very much.